today. As usual, your company is appreciated from the week. We continue to bring you updates in what is happening here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, speaking to you on current issues within the society and within the government. Today we are going to be talking, of course, environmental sustainability. More and more, we are recognizing that the environment and how we treat the environment are very important, because we do not only think in terms of now, but we have to think in terms of generations to come. And the impact on the environment is important. The role that we play in the impact on the environment, because then we have to think in terms of sustainability. Those people who are coming after us, the preservation of the environment, and how that redounds to the benefit of all of us. Today we are going to be having a discussion on the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve and all the environmental sustainable activities that are taking place surrounding that. I have with me today Mrs. Telka Wallace, who is no stranger. She is, very much integrated into the community, and she does a lot of community work. And she is the project coordinator for the Man and the Biosphere project. Welcome, Mrs. Wallace.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here.
And then I have with me Miss Linnell Bonaparte, and she's an environment officer within the Department of Environment. Welcome, Ms. Bonaparte.
Thank you, and it's great to be here.
Right. It is really a pleasure to have both of you here for such an important discussion. Now, Mrs. Wallace, I want to start with you because we hear all the time about the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve. And in fact, in certain key places on the Island Main Road, we see these big structures talking about the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve. Could you just tell us or remind us what it is?
Thank you. The St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve was inscribed as part of the World Network of Biosphere Reserve under UNESCO. This inscription was done in 2011, and it has given special protection and special designation to the area that covers from Canada Estate down to the Grange. Now, the area was chosen because of certain characteristics, being the environmental heritage from that area, the cultural and the historical. And the environmental characteristics is we have our marine area, and it goes into the terrestrial area. And these areas are protected areas. We have the North and South Reef in the Keys and Hermitage Bay areas, where we have the endangered species of turtle that come to nest annually. And we also have the hawksbill, along with a number of endangered species of birds. And so when the area was designated, there was a documentation of all of the, we call them assets, that fall within the area. And the assets include the residents, which are number one. Then we have the marine species, and we have the species of plants. We have our cultural and our historical artifacts, and our waterways our rivers and what we call guts that impact on the beach. And so the designation is very important, and it was the first of its kind within the English-speaking Caribbean.
So it holds a lot of importance in terms of the environmental history.
Yes.
It holds a lot of importance. Now, why is it so important to preserve the St. Mary's Biosphere? I know that there's a lot of flora and fauna,
yes,
and all of that.
Yes.
Why is it so important?
When we look at what is happening within our environment, and the fact that I have to say our generation is not taking very good care of the environment, and we look at the fact that our foreparents gave it to us in a clean and pristine condition, and not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, but around the world, there are things that become very critical to our very lives, our being, our well-being, because when we look at the things that we are throwing in the environment, and it is going into the sea, and we spoke about the North and the South Reef, and that is where our marine species feed. And so taking care of the environment is actually taking care of ourselves. And that particular area of our federation, where it falls within an area that we have the endangered species of birds that come to lay, we have the endangered species of turtles that also come to lay. Then we have flora and fauna that are particular to that area, including medicinal plants. And so taking care, special care of this environment so that we can pass it on to our next generation in a good condition is very critical. Yes.
Right. Now, Linnell, you are the environment officer. You are on board with the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve. Now, what are some of the environmental practices that are required to really keep this area pristine, keep it,
First of all, I would like to say that I would like to thank MAB for taking this opportunity, and it actually supports our mandate at the Department of Environment, which is to protect, conserve. So one of the main practices or solutions is the easiest one, the cheapest one, which is awareness, public awareness, to educate as much as possible to get the school children involved. And this is something that the Biosphere has been doing by incorporating the Keon Primary and Keon High School. Also have the community involved. And well, we are here, we are going to talk about it later on, about the cleanup. But one of the practices are, well, one is actually the cleanup, which we're actually going to do on Saturday. So by getting the community involved in cleanups and education, so those are the main two things I can think about when it comes to the St. Mary's Biosphere.
Right. Now, could you tell us something about the recent activities that you have had? That's before we go to the cleanup.
Okay. It was a very exciting year, 2021. We were able to cover a lot of grounds. We got funding under the UNESCO Participation Program to implement a project called the Cleanup of the Keon River, Hermitage Estate, Keon, and Hermitage and Keys Bays. And the project had several components, one of which was education and sensitization. And the education and sensitization was done via community outreach, going to the community, telling them about the project, having a community meeting to make them aware of the project and to see how they can support the project. Then we had a sustainable disposal of solid waste workshop, where Lynelle herself was instrumental in developing that particular workshop, the thematic areas of the workshop. And so the persons who we invited to the workshop were critical to the effort of cleanup. There were community leaders, persons who dispose of solid waste as part of their living, trucking. We also invite businesses from the area that deals with that, such as Contec and TDC, along with the truck drivers from the area, along with the persons from the Keon High School, and other interested stakeholders. And the workshop focused on 3 main areas. That is, one of which was expounding on the project, looking at solid waste from an environmental perspective, and looking at how solid waste, when it is indiscriminately thrown about, how it affects the environment and what can be done. And one of the key things that was done was that we had someone from solid waste management come in and did a session, and how much it costs, the tipping fees. So when you hire a truckman to take out your garbage, you have to be strategic. A lot of time the truckmen take, without knowing the damage that they are doing, they take the waste and they throw it all over the place. It doesn't cost that much to take it to the designated area. So the person from solid waste actually came in with a chart with a cost of how much it costs. And it costs pennies. It doesn't cost much. And so that was an awareness for all of us. Because I personally, when I take things to the solid waste, I go with the driver. Or I let him come for his pay when he come with the receipt from the solid waste. There's no wrong thing if you tell the person, okay, go ahead and throw the garbage, and when you come back, bring the receipt and I will pay you. These are things that we have to do. Then we had the Sustainable Livelihood Camp, where we invited children from the Keon Primary School and the Keon High School. They are the next generation who would be taking this process forward. And so part of the project sought to transfer knowledge to the younger generation via the Sustainable Livelihood Camp. It was really fun, and the children were so enthusiastic, and it really surprised me. I was very heartened by the response of the children from both the primary and the high school. And some of the interesting things that was done was we did a scavenger hunt, where we gave them a sheet of paper with items of garbage that they may find on the beach, and we split them up into groups and send them out on the beach. And in 25 minutes, they picked up about 10 bags of garbage in 25 minutes. And we took them back to the plenary site where we have in the camp at the primary school, and they were able to articulate all the things that they found, and then again related to how long this particular item of debris will last in the environment. And because some items take up to 300 years to decompose, then we look at our current solid waste situation and how long will that last? And if we continue to dispose of things the way how we are, then we know within 50 years we would not have any place to plant food, because it would all be covered with garbage. And then we had the we have the environmental awareness rally, where we brought in educators against solid waste, the marine management area, Department of Environment, and Angelique Dance group that deals with the environment as well, along with community members and the minister with responsibility for the area. And we had a really interesting rally where we spoke about environmental awareness.
Now, Linnell, how does all of this fit into the Department of Environment's plans and objectives, especially in light of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations?
So at the Department of Environment, we focus on Goal 13, which deals with climate change, 14, which is life underwater, and 15, life on land. So those are the three main goals that we focus on. So what the Man and Biosphere is doing, it actually supports it, but I will just focus more on the last two. So MAB, it takes a ridge to reef approach. So no area is isolated from each other. It actually takes a holistic approach where all key stakeholders are included. So when I say ridge to reef, it's actually from the mountain to the sea. Mm-hmm. So that is one great aspect of Man and the Biosphere. So Man and the Biosphere, we don't really just focus on the coastal areas with the turtles and what's not, but we want to address the issues up in the mountain, because as Mrs. Wallace would have said, is that waste from illegal dumping, actually it will travel down to the ocean, to the sea, and it impacts the marine life. So with MAB, we account for all of it. So we are addressing the illegal dumping situation, and then that will help us to deal with the situation at sea. And as I said, this supports what we are doing at the Ministry of Environment, because we want to protect, we want to conserve. Also, we are signatories to many conventions such as CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity, and where we have our commitments. So when groups such as MAB come on board and actually protect, actually support these commitments, we at the Department of Environment, we are happy that we have that support from local NGOs or community groups. I hope I answered everything, but if I missed anything, please feel free to ask.
Right. Yes, so everything is so connected. And our bad practices of mistreating the environment, whether it is pollution, throwing our garbage in the guts, and so on, we may not be thinking in terms of what we are doing. But our action is really affecting the environment in so many ways. As you mentioned, the garbage then finds its way down to the sea.
Yes.
In our waterways,
yes,
polluting the water. And of course, that pollution then leads to the marine life being affected.
And we eat it.
And then we eat it. And so it's a whole...
It's interconnected.
It's a ripple effect. It's all connected.
It's interconnected. And one of the aspects that we did not even mention is the health aspect. Mm-hmm. There's a serious health aspect that comes into play when water settles in old bottles and pans and so on that cause mosquitoes, breed mosquitoes, and we know, and rodents and different things that impact our health. So having these issues addressed will be an asset to impact our health in a positive way. And so if I can go back to Linnell again about the survey as part of the workshop on sustainable disposal, Linnell developed a survey that was administered to persons living along the waterway. So maybe she could expound a bit on the findings of the survey.
Yes, so as Ms. Wallace said, that I was instrumental in carrying out a small little survey to understand or to actually know what the people of Keyon actually know about illegal dumping and the impacts, which most of the persons in the survey, they're actually knowledgeable that illegal dumping will affect us adversely. So they're actually knowledgeable, so that is good. That it indicates to us that awareness is out there, that the persons know. I think the issue though is sometimes we like to look for the cheaper way and forget about the impacts, because it might not affect us now, and sometimes we forget about the future, which is basically sustainable development, developing now and keeping the future generations in mind. So sometimes we tend to isolate it and look at the cheaper route, which would have come up at the sustainable workshop, where many persons feel that when they dump into the river, when they dump into the gut, it just ends there, and it removes the burden of going all the way to the Connery landfill, which from the survey, I was actually happy to see that the knowledge and the awareness is out there. But we just need to address the issue where people feel that it is a burden to go to the Connery landfill. So I don't really think that people are uneducated with the issues of illegal dumping, because many of them, they got the opportunity to highlight the issues where they would have said that mosquito, the breeding of mosquitoes, pests as rats, they would have highlighted it blocks the flow of the river, it impacts fishes, soil contamination. So we see these are the responses from the people in the community. So they're actually knowledgeable. And then also I heard some of the elders, they would talk about the condition of the river before and what is happening now.
Yes.
And that, we have to think about the future generation. So the education is there, and yes, we're just trying to continue to educate and address the issue that the community is facing, where some persons might not want to go all the way to Connery. Because I even put myself in their shoes, where if I live St. Paul's and I have to go all the way to Connery, it is a deterrent somewhat. So sometimes, just to put myself in their shoes, I can understand. It is just easier to just pelt it over the wall, and that is it. Mm-hmm. But as a country, we need to deal with that. But as for now, we are just encouraging people to do what is right. Even though it has a cost attached to it, try. For now, try your best to do the right thing. And don't dump illegally, but to do the right thing. And that is what we want. Yes, the government, once we push, hopefully some kind of solution comes about.
That brings me to government. You just mentioned it, Linnell, in terms of government is responsible for putting in place legislation that will deter people from these illegal practices, these practices that are not sustainable. Could you speak a little bit to maybe the legislation that the government has with respect to things like illegal dumping?
Okay, so in our act, the Environmental Act, so the National, I don't want to mix it up.
Yes.
So National Conservation and Environmental Protection Act, in that it addresses it addresses illegal dumping, especially in guts, where there is a fine, the lowest 500, and it can go up to thousands of dollars.
Yes.
The issue now is enforcement, of course, and catching people. Because if I see somebody dump in the guts, how can I prove it? When I go to courts, how can I prove that they actually dumped there? So that is the issue. The laws are there. In the country, we have laws. We have a lot of laws. And then you still have the Solid Waste Act laws.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have laws. But the problem is enforcement. Also, people might see and they might be fearful to talk because you don't know the implications. You don't know what would happen if you talk.
Right. So the environment officers, just like you are an environment officer, do you go out into the communities and look for, perhaps ways in which the environment is being affected, like illegal dumping, burning down a forest and that sort of a thing, and inquire about these practices?
Yes, we actually do. We do patrols, weekly patrols, and we look at guts to see, okay, here illegal dumping is happening. So yes, we actually do patrols.
Okay, so you go out and
Yes, we do.
you have surveillance taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Now the nature preserves
Yes.
are very important because we are talking here in terms of biodiversity
Yes.
and the importance of biodiversity, when that is affected, how it affects ecosystems and all of that. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that, Ms. Wallace, in terms of the protecting that biodiversity
Well,
within the...
as Linnell said, we have signed on to several conventions, and the main one that is out there is the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and the 17 goals are interconnected, where they speak about access to clean water. They talk about rivers and the sea, protecting water on land and in the sea, and protection of the environment. When you're protecting water, because remember, a lot of things that we do invariably end up in the water. If we use pesticides and harmful chemicals, they end up in the water. And so there's a delicate balance. I mean, God made us wonderfully that we can ingest all of these things and still walk around there. But we have to take responsibility for our environment. And many of us, our yards are clean, our homes are sterile, but if we look around the community, then there's a different. I think in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have been doing a very good job in terms of the step workers, the peace workers are doing a very good job, because I've worked with them and they do a great job, and we want to commend them for the job that we're doing. But all of us have to step on board. I'm sure you drive around, and sometimes the guys and the females and males just finish cleaning an area, and somebody will just throw out something. These are the behaviors that create imbalance in our environment, because we see it, we just don't want our car dirty, so we just throw it out. How about waiting until you reach to a garbage disposal area and then you throw it in a bin? The same thing, if you live close to the waterway, instead of dumping in the waterway, how about saying, I am going to take care of my part of the waterway, so that when I buy fish, I know the fish is healthy. And so the balance, the biodiversity that we have in our environment, we have to protect every area of our environment, and even our cultural and historical heritage effects, because these are assets that can be quantified in dollars, and in time to come we will have to do that, because if you have a piece of land and the land have on something of a historical or cultural value, you know the value of the land go up. As Linnell was talking about the biodiversity, there was a project a few years ago by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, where they were trying to get the NCMA legislation, and I think he had one reading. The NCMA legislation don't just look at what the NCPA had looked at, but it promotes it to protection of our biodiversity, meaning you cannot take up anything from our environment without our knowledge. And these, even if somebody is going to take up something, it has to be registered with the Department of Environment. And so it is not just about that, but it's about the legal, about what belongs to us. Because before now, there wasn't anything that protects our biodiversity. So somebody can take up our asset, an asset from out of our environment, make millions, as has happened in other countries, and there is nothing that is going to come back to us, because there is no protection of that particular asset. So if we know that these assets are there, it is upon us to take care of every plant, every flower, every species that we own in our federation, because it belongs to all of us.
A lot of it has to do with...
Yes.
Go ahead, Linnell.
Yes, just to add what Ms. Wally said, we have the Nagoya Protocol,
Yes.
which protects what we have here. So if there is any research or any scientist wants to actually take our resource for maybe medicinal purposes, then they will have to get a permit and permission to do that. So it's not a free for all. So there is actually something in place where we manage and control that. So we are improving.
Yes. That came out of the project from the IUCN, the Nagoya Protocol, that was implemented here. There are even some signs at the airports and seaports that says that the assets of St. Kitts belong to St. Kitts. So it's a whole host of things that answers that you just brought up there when you spoke about biodiversity, because protection of our biodiversity is not just protection from damage, but protection from people taking it away from us without our knowledge and without our benefit.
Yes, and a lot of it has to do with education. Linnell, you're an educator, and starting with, of course, our children, so that they can understand the importance of preserving and protecting the environment. And additionally, I think there's need for more signage.
Yes.
Probably around the island, in terms of please do not litter, please do not dump garbage here. There's also need perhaps for more television ads and things like that. You know, awareness is extremely important.
Yes.
Making people aware that, you know, their actions are affecting the environment. Does the department, apart from, you know, what you're doing now, do you have any plans to ramp up, for example, signage around the island, television, you know, infomercials and that sort of thing?
Well, for now, we mostly try to go about it via social media. But I can suggest, or maybe it is already in the plans, but yes, I can push for that,
Yes.
especially in my role as conservation officer at the department. Just to add something that came to mind when Ms. Wallace was talking, at the same sustainability workshop, I would have mentioned about this community, well, it's a co-management approach that is actually successful in Tobago. So co-management, we have both community and the government working together. But the community has to see it beneficial to them. So in Tobago, there is the Argyle Waterfalls. It's a 3-tier waterfall. The community, well, the government would have set up the whole structure, but the community is the one involved in doing the tours, selling craft, etc. So imagine myself as a member of the community working and receiving income from the waterfall. Would I allow anyone to come in to dump illegally? No. Because you are taking away my income. And I think an approach like this in our country can work, where we help community members to see the importance of the resources or the resource that is in their community, and they must do something to protect it. So I think that is needed. We need the community, because many times persons come from outside of the community and will dump, and no one wants to say anything. But if it is a benefit, a direct benefit to me, I will, because you are taking away my income.
Right. Mm-hmm. You're right. She's very right. And that is the approach we're taking with the Keon River, where eventually tours would be done within the Keon River, because the Keon River is not just a waterway, but it has springs at different areas within. We are even testing the spring water to see how clean it is, if it had any contaminants, or if it is pure enough that it can be used. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Especially now, with tourism, and tourism basically is our main income. Mm-hmm. Income earner at this time. And if we keep polluting our beaches, our guts, our forests, and all of that sort of a thing, it doesn't speak very well for tourism, and it's going to affect tourism.
That's true.
You see, so I do know that the tourism department works along as well with the Ministry of Tourism.
They work with
works
the MAB
along
as well.
with the Department of Environment, and they have the plastic free
and the MAB as well.
and things like that.
Well, yeah.
Because we use a lot of plastic, and the plastic ends up where it should not end up.
That's true.
We just throw plastic in drains, in guts, on the beaches, and plastic ends up in the water.
Yes.
Apart from it being unsightly, it ends up in our oceans. It chokes the marine life, and all of that.
Yes. And so our cleanup, which is scheduled for Saturday coming, hopes to tackle that.
Right, and we are talking about ecotourism now.
Yes.
Because when tourists come to the island, we have to diversify our tourism product. It's not just about sand, sea, and sun.
They want
that was the basic thing: sand, sea, and sun. But now people want to go to the
communities. They want to go
into the communities, the community tourism,
and get to eat the local food, and get to sample all of the local cultural things. And so having a tour up Keon River with Paulette them, Paulette them up there by the roundabout.
Yes.
Let's have Paulette them do some crayfish, and they normally do the crab on the weekend. So if they come up the river and they meet up by Paulette or some other entity and they have a local fair, these are things that we have to look forward to, because entrepreneurship is one of the highest things on our agenda as well. And so we want to create employment for persons, and that Keon waterway have the potential to create a lot of employment. And as Linnell said earlier, that in the Tobago study, where the government and the community work together, the government it has to be some political will in there to get this product to the level where it is. Because, as I said earlier, this project is being done through the participation funding from UNESCO. When the government, if, for example, the government put in some money and UNESCO put in some money and the community put in the man hours or whatever, then at the end of the day, we will have a product that we can all be proud of. And when people are involved in putting something to a higher standard, you don't dare bring it down because they will fight you. So this is definitely, the co-management approach is definitely the way to go.
Yes, and Mr. Williams, why the government is important as well. Because, yes, Keon River has the potential to increase or to employ persons, but we must always keep in mind sustainable development. We don't want people to overuse the resource, because then what will the future get or benefit from
That's
it?
true.
So we must always have that sustainable development. We must always have sustainable development always in our minds. Because, for example, with the fisheries, many fishermen will fish and then even go to the small fishes, and then that is a problem. But many like to focus on, no, I need to feed my family, yes, but then next 2 years, what are you going to do? And this is always the issue.
That's true.
We want people to see the benefit of the resource, yes, but they must use it at a rate that is sustainable. So yes, we want people to sell fish and crayfish and all of those things, but leave the juveniles, leave them. And this is why the government is important, because then you have DMR, Department of Marine Resources, now coming in and putting in the regulation and size limits, etc. So a co-management approach, yes, we want the community to benefit, but as well the government has to be there to guide the community.
Yes, so there has to be some habitat restriction.
Yes. And first and foremost, we did an assessment of the Keon waterway. And again, environment was involved in conducting the assessment.
Right, and that brings me to something. You can speak about the assessment, Mrs. Wallace, but the whole area of research. What research is really being carried out, especially with the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, because the research can tell you quite a lot in terms of what are the species. Are there any species that are rare to that area?
Yes.
Are there any species that are endangered? What are we doing to protect certain species of animals and plants?
Yes.
For example, that sort of research, I don't know if it has been done, but research like that should be ongoing to complement in terms of what you're doing.
I know the Total Monitoring Network, they do collect data, because when the turtle comes in to lay, they because of the way how the beach is eroded, so sometimes if they leave the eggs where the turtle placed them, they would be washed out. So they move them, and in moving them, they count them. They also tag the turtle to see how often it comes there, because the turtles are endangered, so they know, and they put a monitor in it. So when it ends up, they say ends up in Boston, somewhere far, they're able to say, well, this turtle was tagged in St. Kitts and Nevis, which has happened. And so there are entities that are doing research, but the collection of all of that data to put into one comprehensive database that you could say, this is the data from the map as it relates to the biodiversity, as it relates to flora and fauna, as it relates to species of animals that are inhabited in there, that it relates to businesses, that it relates to the historical and the cultural heritage. That is something that still has to be collated. Also, let me just say to that, this is the 10th anniversary of the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve. And so some of these activity that we have been doing falls under the 10th anniversary celebration. And moving forward, we are hoping to go a little bit more in depth into the conservation of the area.
Ms. Wallace?
Yes.
Just to add, so the Department of Environment, we do some research, as well as in 2017, we would have had our inventory, where a rapid assessment was done in the entire country, both St. Kitts and Nevis. So we have an idea of our species. We need long-term monitoring though, because a rapid assessment is only a snapshot. So we need that long-term monitoring. One advantage that the larger countries have, like where the UE, like Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad, is that there is the university there. So most research projects, you actually have to do it. The student will have to find funding, you get the support from the school, and that is one of our issues, that we don't have a university here. You might get Ross University doing something with diseases, but when it comes to actually data collection and what's not, no. Because I would have studied in Trinidad and I would have had the support from the university to conduct research, as well as I have a supervisor, which he is a researcher or she is a researcher, so she can guide me, especially in analyzing my data. And this is one limitation that we have. So we always have to rely on projects. So it's really a limitation that we have to work on and try to get people interested. Sometimes I, to be honest, don't really feel the passion of is really trying to get persons interested, but is that it is not what they are passionate about. You don't really get that passion from them. So really, we need to get persons passionate, maybe in CFBC, in the environmental class, or whatever we can, to get our citizens interested in collecting data. I'm not sure if it could be incorporated in the IAs, etc., but that is one hurdle that we have here in the country. And that is an advantage that the larger countries, they have, because they have the students actually doing the research. They always have that continuous data collection. And then you have these NGOs, a lot of them, they have more NGOs who are willing to collect the data. While in St. Kitts, we don't really have that. We don't really have the resources. So it's not as easy.
You know, especially when we're talking about nature trails and all of that, the eco-education is extremely important. For example, it's not just people going on a hike, going on a nature trail, going up into the forest, and all of that, but to be able to explain to people, well, these are the species of birds that we have. When you see one, you're able to point it out and say, well, this is a flamingo. Or, you know, to point out the plants and to say, well, this is the name of the plants, and this is perhaps the scientific name for these, because all of these plants and things like that. So the tour guides can have some knowledge and to be able to explain to the visitors and so on.
Yes, and especially our local people, because we need to know what we have. We can't take pride in what we do not know. And so we need to know what we have. And we have some persons who are on the MAP committee who are, you know, them old-time medicine men. Like Winston Ibu Caesar, and we have Kevin Bowers, These are people who study plants and study the different uses for plants and so on. And we are privileged to have them on our committee, because when we go into the nature, they are able to point out, well, this plant, the name of the plant, sometimes you have the scientific name of the plant and what it is good for. And so we have, even along the Keon River, it's so interesting because you have the old Congo town where the Maroons, when people run away, slaves run away from the plantation, they used to go up in the mountain and they planted particular palm oil trees where if you go up there, you see them up there, and you know they've been up there for hundreds of years. And you have the Congo town along the river. And so when you go into these areas, it's good to have someone who have knowledge of the area, otherwise you're just tramping through. You're not really getting an education. And this is where you see the heliconias, where we have a species of heliconia that is only found in that particular area.
But Mr. Williams, there are persons who are very knowledgeable. Because I love birds, and I'm involved in birding, and there is like Mr. Percival Hanley and Mr. Michael Ryan. Those are our two main birders, and then we have Kate Orchard. So we have persons, but the challenge is really getting our citizens involved. Because when I started to birding, you know, some persons will make the comment, you are a foreigner. That is not something that we would do. So it comes across as weird to them. So I think that we need to help persons to build their pride in their country, in what we have, the little we have. Or even sometimes I would hear people say, Lynette, what birds you counting? We ain't have no birds. And the first time when I went birding, we got maybe about 60 species. And then to learn that we have about 200 species here. So it's like, wow. And I'm still counting. I haven't reached 100 as yet, but I am still counting and hoping that I will get there. But I'm soon at 100. But I am hoping. But I mean, like, our people, we are not passionate about these things, environmental stuff. We are not. So we leave it for the foreigners to come in and do the research. That is really one of our problems.
We certainly need to have more people like you who are passionate about the environment and you know, the flora and the fauna that we really have, and that we need to preserve, and to preserve it for generations to come. Now, in terms of habitat loss, because through practices that you were speaking about, maybe sometimes it's land development.
Yes.
Sometimes it's, you know, the way that we treat the environment, there's habitat loss. Do you know of any habitat loss in the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve? Maybe some, fauna that used to be there that is no longer there? That has been...
Because we're focusing on the Keon River. When I was younger, and we used to wash by the river and bathe by the river, and there were a lot of different species of fruits, like fat pork, you had sugar apple and custard apple, and all different species of mangoes. And we have a lot of different species of breadfruit around the island, but Keon have a particular kind of breadfruit. And so part of the project was to do there is a 5-year plan for the map that has been developed. And part of that plan is reforestation, putting in back in some of this stuff that we would have lost. And we have had loss in the amount of bees that we have to pollinate our plants as well, because of development and the smoke and all of that. You find that we do not have as much of the bird species that we used to have. And so these are all, and we have had the monkey situation, we are overpopulation. So we have lost some habitat, and we have lost habitat to the monkeys as well. So the farming community would have had great loss. Because remember, in years past, we had the sugar belt. And the sugar belt protected the community from the monkeys because they didn't have to come down past the sugar belt. And so now they do, because we no longer have that. And even in the Keys Beach, where the turtles come in to nest, I do not know if it is permanent, but you find that sometimes you lose the sand where when the turtle come in, it can't go all the way in because there's a big bank. So they would have lost their nesting area because of the wave action, and that is attributed to climate change, where the sea level is rising and so on. So we will have, coming out of this, I hope this information that going out there, persons will become more interested and more in tune with what is going on in our environment. Because as Lionel said, the bird watching, that is a very, very interesting pastime. Because last year, I think it was early 2020 or late 2019, we went down to Hermitage Estate to do an assessment. And we saw the yellow-breasted canary, right? Hadn't seen it in maybe 20 years. And we saw two of them, either one or two of them in the Hermitage Estate. And it was like, wow, it was such a marvel. And you see butterflies that you haven't seen for years and years because a lot of people don't go into these areas. So the environment is very rich in our natural environment. It's very rich with different species of birds, different species of butterflies, and we need to take out our children and go out and see what is in our natural environment. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Linnell, Mrs. Wallace mentioned something extremely important, that of climate change. And we hear a lot of that today. There are world conferences, the COP this and the COP that, talking about climate change and what they must do in terms of reversing certain things because the world is heading down the wrong path with respect to climate change. How much of that really affects, if you could tell us how that really affects, for example, different species and, and all of that?
With climate change, we know that it changed natural events, such as the hurricane, more intense, you might have droughts. And really, the change of these natural events will actually impact the habitats or impact the way that these species are able to cope because they are not accustomed. Maybe they cannot adapt to these changes effectively. So that is one reason, well, that is the main, I would think about the main reason, or is the main reason how climate change can impact species, really the change of events, and these species not able to adapt effectively to these changes.
Mm-hmm. So we have to think in terms of sometimes maybe our practices and so on can help in restoring habitats.
Well, there's another aspect of it where the trees, the fruit trees, may not be a fruit the time that they normally do. So that too would affect species. Because let's say, for example, a certain species a bird come to the island and they're accustomed to get mangoes, but mangoes didn't come in as yet. What are they going to eat? They have to find something else to eat, And so there's a host of things that happens when the season changes up because of the climate change. And you spoke about drought. Drought is a slow onset impact. And a lot of the farmers over the 2020, 2021 experienced drought. We look at the water, where we had to move to rationing of water. And we are saying our resources are no longer unlimited, they are limited. So we have to take care of them. What can you do to help to slow down the impact of climate change? We have to look at certain things, that practices, like how much energy do you use? How much water do you use? How are we going to protect our plant life in the event that there is a drought, so that plants can continue we can continue to produce, Yeah, those are some of the things that we have to look at.
Sustainable living.
Sustainable, living.
Sustainable living. We have to think in terms of, the very, very little things that we do. Because sometimes we think that we are not having an impact, but because they're just very little things. But if everybody is doing it, it's really a build-up.
A build-up.
Right? And so there are very little things that we can do to preserve our environment, things that we can do to conserve energy. For example, turning off the light when you're not using it.
Right.
Do not leave the tap running while you're brushing your teeth. All of these little things, and these things help us to be aware. It's the awareness. It's the general awareness. Purchasing sustainable products.
Yes.
Instead of using the plastic, you purchase some alternative to plastic.
And the biodegradables. The biodegradables.
The biodegradables and things like that. Because all of these things tie into what we're having a discussion here about today.
Yes, but
in terms of the environment.
I mentioned just recently, when we were growing up, there was no plastic. We had a bag that we went to the shop with. And they would
sometimes we used to call, I remember, it's a crocus bag.
The crocus bag or the shopping bag.
Yes, the shopping bag. Sometimes you make them out of, the things that rice used to come in. And
the rice bag and the flour bag.
The flour bag.
Yes, and what about, how did you go to buy goat water? Did they have a container to give you, or did you walk?
Your bowl.
You took your bowl with you.
You walked with your bowl.
There are little things that we can do to prevent these major impact on our environment. And one of it is, when you're going to buy goat water and when you're going to buy black pudding or sauce or whatever, you go with your bowl. They could measure it out in the container that they usually do and try it out in your bowl, and they could measure somebody else and try it out in the bowl.
Someone might say not in this COVID time.
No, but you're not eating out of it. But it protects you because you bring your own container and you're going back with your own container. When you take a plastic, you have a plastic, you have this styrofoam that have been touched and touched and touched. But if somebody bring out a container and pour over your goat water in your container, they don't necessarily have to touch it. So it's actually a protection measure right there.
Yes.
So
okay, we are going to go to the phone lines, and after that we can discuss your environmental awareness rally, because a lot of it has to do with awareness and getting people to value the environment. The numbers to call are 466-2666. That is 466-2666, 662-8674, 662-8674, 767-4765, 767-4765, and the overseas number is 1-239-645-4500. We await your calls. Right. So a lot of it is awareness, awareness, awareness. Because you can really tell the values of people by their practices.
yes,
And by people's practices, you can tell their values.
yes,
Yes.
So a lot has to do with awareness.
that is true.
We have to be aware of our surroundings. We have to be aware of the environment. And we have to be, we just have to have this education, awareness, so that we know that if we do this, these are the consequences.
Right.
And so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have to play an active part. Each one of us has a responsibility to make sure that our community and our country is at a level that we would have in our own home. And so all of us are responsible, everyone, from children, and that is why we targeted children as well. Because from children to adult, we want everyone to take responsibility.
Right. So you're going to have an environmental awareness rally?
We had it already.
You already had that rally.
We are going to do the cleanup.
You're going to do the cleanup now?
Yes.
And that will be the cleanup of where, in particular?
We are doing a simultaneous cleanup of the Keon River, Hermitage and Keys Bays on the 29th, which is Saturday. And we're starting at 6:30 in the morning. And the cleanup, when the assessment was done of the waterway, we found that there was a lot of bottles in the waterway. In some areas, there are some areas where we have concentration of garbage. And so we are going to have teams of persons at different intervals along the waterway. And then we are going to have persons on the beach. We're going to have different teams on the beach because we want to do it simultaneously. So that, interestingly, we're going up to the turtle nesting season.
Yes.
And so we want to have the beach clean. And in order to have the beach clean, we have to have the waterway clean as well. And so we are tackling from all of the areas so that when the rains start to come, we don't have a lot of debris coming down on the beach. Yeah.
Right. So you're working, in collaboration
Yes.
with the Solid Waste
Yes.
Management Corporation.
Yes, there are a number of entities that we are working with. The Solid Waste Management, they are the ones who have the dumpsters and everything. We have the Department of Environment, that's Linnell's work. We have the Turtle Monitoring Network. We have the youth. We have the youth volunteer corps. We have the Keon and primary school. We have children, and they're very enthusiastic about coming. And we have the Keon, and they're now MAB ambassadors. They have been graduated to MAB ambassadors.
That's good.
At a young age. The youngest person at the Sustainable Livelihood Camp was 9 years old. Very intelligent young girl, up to 16 years. And so all of these youngsters are going to be on the beach. We don't want to send them in the waterway, so they're going to be on the beach. We also have parks and beaches, which have a team of persons in the Keon area. The Keon Netball Club, all those nice-looking girls and so would be there as well. So we are looking at having a fun time in that we don't want it to seem like a chore, but we want to have an effective cleanup that tackles the problems that we have on the beach and in the waterway at the same time.
You're going to have refreshments?
Definitely.
People,
Definitely. When you're going to take someone out of their bed at 6:30 in the morning, you better have something to give them.
Yes. We have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leroy, and the two ladies there.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, well, first thing first. When you give out the telephone number, expect calls right away.
Yes.
From me.
You're one of my most faithful callers.
Right, and Jam Dong, and Alice, and Dumpling.
Yes, I appreciate the callers.
Right, now, we are talking about environment. Let me fly on a plane a little while and come back. In the Virgin Islands, they have signs. I heard one of the ladies talk about signs on the side of the road, and she's correct. In the Virgin Islands, they have signs on the side of the road. $1,000 fine for littering. Now, a lot of people don't like to spend $1 to buy a bag of nuts, much less $1,000. I mean, yeah, they don't want to spend that. And if the environmental people would put up those signs along the road, a lot of people will not litter because they don't want to pay that. And I said that about 3 years ago. They need to put up these signs telling people if you litter, even if you throw down the red thing off of a peanut when you don't shell it out and the blood out of your door, you litter in. As small as it is, they build up. And sweetie paper can build up. Now, some years ago, there was a captain on a ship. He and he drunken habit and he battled caused a great part of the world, the environment, the marine environment, and the birds' habitat to suffer because of he and he battle. A lot of birds die with the oil that spilled from the ship that he run on a reef. And so therefore that was littering into the marine life. Now we got some people inland here. When they fry the fowl and they board and watch everything, they don't get a container and carry oil over the solid waste. They throw it out of it and it run down in the drain. Down Rosemary Lane I'm talking about. The oil go down in Rosemary Lane and it go down on West Square Street and down the smell stink because blood, water and oil and all kind of thing go down there. And I've been trying to get to a program, a woman on a program on a different media since last year to tell she about that. And she just got in the media and just yapping and wouldn't take up the phone. What she was in there yapping saying is what Macall and Bridges were telling us for years. So what she got in there and say, ain't nothing new. It's old and up to now she ain't pick up the phone. When the whole place been nasty up with people who nasty, dirtying up the environment, when the oil go down in the sea, you're going to kill the fishes. So I'm glad that you all on this program that I could Lego that. And I want ZIZ to get a program for you all to go talk about the environment. Because if you all have a program on ZIZ, the environment will be much cleaner. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you very much and have a good day. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon to Miss Wallace there and the next lady. Well, I want to commend you all to operating us a new environment because this is something that's very important to talk about environment. Because environment is very important and keeping the country clean and keeping our shores and our, different place clean. Now, talking about environment, when I was coming up as a small boy coming up, you know that before you left, go to school at morning, you eat your breakfast, go to school, you got to make sure the yard clean up, clean. One little piece of bush up in the yard, we got to clean it up before we go to school. And when we come back from school, the same thing as anything. So that in those days, the environment was very protected because the children them don't learn when they go and they eat the sweetie or they eat a sugar cake and something up. They know what to do with it. They don't throw it down like that. I could remember good. The environment like this. I used to go to Biosphere and the show used to clean. Even before them things go down there. So I remember you talk about the bag them, the soda bag them where they used to make bag with it. Well, when I used to go to Tonga shop as a small boy, I used to walk with a box, a pasteboard box. A man named Melvin to cross Irish Town. That time not a supermarket was in town yet. I think it was only Kawaja and what time was around. And we go in and they shop the back, they're going to wrap your rice, whatever, in a paper bag. And you're going to pack the box. And when you don't pack the box, I put the box from here and go down to the bus station and jump in the bus and put the box in the bus and go home and, And then the environment was like this. But now we get so much education, social media and everything they educate us about the environment and everything. People still out to hand doing all kind of things. And you know that these are tourist attraction country right now. That is where we depend on most. And if we don't keep our environment clean, you understand, it will hamper us in the future. So we got to keep, whether in the sea, or in the town or whatsoever, up on the beach, we got to keep our environment clean. So calling on all the people who like dispose the thing anywhere they go, and stop it. We got to deal with it. All right then. Well
Thank
programmed.
thank you so much for your valuable contribution. Any of you like to comment on what they have said, mostly the supportive comments
Yes.
that they made?
I am very happy to hear, as we said earlier, it is not everybody who is doing this. There are some of us as Kittitians who take pride in our environment. We just want more persons to come on board to take responsibility. Children in households, everyone should take responsibility. And the first caller, when he spoke about having signs around about the fine that you would be charged, because if I drive my car without a license and the police stop me, I know what the charge is. If I drive my car and I go beyond the speed limit, the speed limit is there. So if I am driving, I have to be aware of what the speed limit is. And if I go exceed the speed limit, I'm expected to pay the penalty. And it's the same way when you put up signs that indicate to persons, because that is part of the education process. I am giving you fair warning that if you continue in this behavior, because it is a behavior, we have knowledge, then we have to address our attitude towards the knowledge that we receive, and then we had to further address our behavior. Am I going to continue to do this even though I have to pay if I do it? Because as you say, in the Virgin Islands, I was in the US. When you go in the US, you can't do those things.
Yeah, if we had in this country, because only from time to time the police is out on the road.
That is true.
Checking
Yes.
in terms of the speed limit.
Right.
But if we had cameras
Yes.
and you get a ticket in the mail, the government would have made a lot of money from people who are
Not
breaking
from me. Not
the
from me.
laws, the speeding.
Not from me. I do drive Miss Daisy.
And it is a fact that in some
Yes.
countries, you
Yes.
know, you don't see the police, but the cameras are there,
Right.
and you just get your thing in the mail.
In the mail, and you have to comply.
And you have to
Yes.
comply. But a lot of it is, you know, some of it, as you mentioned before, is we speak about the laws, we speak about working for you. Good afternoon. We seem to have lost that caller. Caller, can you please call back? Yes. So we spoke about government legislation. And not just having the legislation, but we spoke also about the enforcement of the legislation. All of things, and the first caller mentioned, of course, the signage, and having signs that says, well, you know, this is the fine that you will have to pay if you are found to be illegally dumping in a particular area, or dumping at all. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, I'm calling for the program.
Yes, sir, certainly. You are online. We're hearing you. Go ahead.
You hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Oh.
Okay. Do you have a contribution you want to make?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Yes, I love the program.
Okay.
Miss Wallace? Some of the things that you say, I just do it. Sometimes I walk with my container and I buy whatever and try to make I don't like them foam things.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And
Very good. Clapping you.
You must remember, people, you know what they're saying? If they're not that keep the place, the workers, them not going to get no work to do. Okay?
Yes.
And really, what Mr. Politics said, with cleaning up the yard, is so right.
Yes.
You understand a lot of nastiness going here.
Yes.
How much?
I have been to some. Thank you so much for your contribution. Do you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, all right. Let somebody else come in.
Okay then. Thank you so much.
Yes.
You know, a lot has to do with the very strict litter laws. You know, I've been to some countries, and it is so clean. It's almost as though you feel you can eat off the it's the roads.
Let me
I
tell
mean,
you.
I looked at, you know, recently when I went to the UAE, to Dubai, and one of the very first things you notice about Dubai is how organized it is and how clean it is. I could not believe it. I really don't know how they do it, but the place is immaculately clean.
Because they don't tolerate anything but cleanliness. In Japan as well, I remembered when I came back from Japan, I came to California, and I went in the mall to look something to eat, and I couldn't eat. The place was too dirty. Because coming to Japan is so clean, coming back to the US, I could not eat immediately because the place was dirty. And you come from such a clean environment, you know.
Yeah, so a lot has to do with, I think, is enforcement and getting the people in that frame of mind and all of that sort of a thing to keep changing behaviors. To keep their surroundings basically clean.
Mr. Williams, what I can think about, many of us younger ones, we don't know of the stories that you, yourself, and Mrs. Wallace and others would have shared about going with the paper bag, etc. We don't know that. So actually forcing this younger generation to go to that is really, it would not work because we don't value, we don't know it. So it's actually changing a way how we were socialized to be. And this is the difficulty. And many countries, they have taken the easier route with banning the plastics and pushing the biodegradables because it still encourages the behavior of single use.
But it just that it decomposes fast.
Yes, so it is actually decomposing faster. So that is the route where we are going because it is very difficult when I am accustomed going to the supermarkets and just get the bag.
Linnell, this is 2022.
Yeah.
Several times I've hosted persons on this panel, whether it be from the Ministry of Tourism, the Department of Environment, and for years there has been this talk about banning single-use plastics. Will it happen in 2022? We have had a lot of talk and talk about it.
Yes.
And we have to start this awareness campaign, education campaign in the country. And how much longer will we wait before we can start doing this? Start getting people in the frame of mind.
Yes.
That look, these are the practices that are now ever so important in order to protect our environment. Because plastics are ending up all over the place and creating a lot of damage, a lot of harm to marine life. They are blocking drains and creating all kind of drainage problems and health problems and all kinds of things. And that is the way that a lot of countries are now going.
Yes.
We have to start educating people in terms of alternatives, reusable bags and all of that sort of a thing.
But
we have started, but I am wondering when will the legislation happen?
Well, Mr. Williams, we are soon there, I must say. We actually submitted something to Cabinet, which they told us to conduct more consultations and then report to them. And then we will move forward. So it's actually there. We did a lot of consultations, and some of my colleagues would have been on the same program speaking and sharing about the consultations. With the third wave, it kind of slowed down, but In this year, 2022, we will continue the consultations and push towards the ban on single-use plastics. In addition, the Man and the Biosphere wants to do some consultations as well, and the information from the Man and Biosphere can help to support us and give us some of the assistance that we need so that we can move closer and closer to the ban.
I think too, my grandmother always used to say, when you see a good habit, pick it up. If we look at a lot of the students who come here from overseas, they walk with their bags to the shop. You see them, right? They walk with their bags to the shop. And they always have the reusable bottle with water. And when we're talking about young people adapting, young people are the ones who adapt the quickest. And so I am going to differ with Lionel in that respect. Even though you're not accustomed to doing that, when you understand that
They adapt quickly, and we can look.
Quickly.
We can look at certain fashion trends. As soon as it starts, you see them in it.
Yes.
It has to become fashionable.
Yes.
And they would be a part of it.
Yes.
Because look how quickly they get on the fashion train when something is new, and then they start doing it. And once it's young people, it's very infectious.
Yes.
And so it
everybody
spreads,
wants to
and
be a
everybody
part of
wants
it.
to be in, and what's not. If it's not sexy, as they said,
Yes.
you know. So we have to really. It is something that we really have to
package it
We have
properly.
to package it properly and really sell it to them.
Definitely.
And they will catch on.
We are hoping that the MAB will become a pilot for the elimination of the single-use plastics. So, as Lionel was alluding to, as we speak, we are writing a project to send to UNESCO to do the sensitization for that, so that we would have a whole year of sensitization, and then from the following year, we could look at banning plastics in that area.
Yes, I look at how easy the supermarkets and the shops dole out this plastic. And one of the reasons that it is so cheap, it is dirt cheap. And so they're doling it out. Some of them even asking, you want the bag double? You want the bag tripled? The bread is already in plastic. They're still giving you 2 plastic to put the bread in. And all of that sort of a thing. It's an overuse, really, of plastic. And that is because it is so cheap. I know, for example, I've seen in places like in London and so on, and you go to the supermarket, and, you know, you take your bag, people take their bag.
Yes, yes.
But if you don't have a bag, you actually have to pay for it.
You have to buy.
You have to buy.
Yeah.
You
I've
have to
seen
buy a bag.
just in Antigua there. I don't know if they're totally banned, but when you go into the supermarket, that was like 2 years ago, just before COVID, you can't get a plastic. You have to buy one of those kind of bags.
You have to buy a bag.
Rams have them too, and they sell them. The reusable.
I also saw that in the UAE. And in fact, if you don't have a bag, there's a particular line for you without a bag. Those with bags go in a particular line. At the cashier.
Yes.
So you're going in the line of shame.
That is correct. You don't have a bag, and so therefore you will have to pay for the bag.
For a bag. Yeah.
You know? And it's a reusable bag.
Yes. And
it's a reusable bag, so they're not giving you plastic.
They're giving you a bag that you can. One of the things, sometimes we buy the bag and we forget it in the house. So one of the things I'm trying to incorporate is to always have the bag in the car. So that when I go to the shop, I remember that I have a bag in the car that I can pack my stuff in, you know.
We have so many plastic bags. I can speak about myself. Sometimes I feel as though the plastic bags are choking me.
Taking you over.
So many plastic bags. Sometimes you use them to take out your garbage in. You put them and use them to take out your garbage in and so on. But it's just an abundance of plastic.
Yes, a lot of time when I go to the store, I don't take a bag. Even if I go to buy something, I say, it's okay, just give me like that, because my car is just the upstairs.
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes when my conscience can, but you know, you don't want to take a plastic bag.
Right. So we are basically at the end of this program. Is there anything else that you want to say in terms of the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, the education campaign that you have embarked upon? Anything that you want the public to know before we go?
We just, okay, go ahead here first, yeah.
Yes, well, I just want to encourage the community to come out and support, because this is your backyard. And many of us who reside outside, we are coming to support you, the community, and we want you to join us. Not just leave us there and let us do it. And then sometimes when we clean up, some persons go back after and dump. And then we feel that our work was done in vain. So we want to encourage the community to be a part. If you cannot make it because you have to work, send your children, get them involved so they can see what is actually going on, the amount of waste that we are going to collect on Saturday. We want you, the community, to come out, as well as to respect our efforts and not go after and throw waste in the guts or the river. Thank you. It was great being here.
All right. Mrs. Wallace?
Yes, I want to reiterate what Linnell has said, in that after the cleanup, you spoke about signs. We are going to put down some signs along the waterway so that persons can be reminded that the Keon River is an important asset. Because of the shortage of water, we do not know when we will have to go back and use that same water, or if we will have to do that. Waterway is cleared, and we are asking persons to come out and support. We are meeting at Maynard's Park at 6:15 on Saturday morning, and it's just going to be about a 2.5 hours worth of work. And we will have refreshment and water and everything there. So, Mr. Williams, you're welcome to come as well.
Okay, we'll see about that.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
So thank you to both of you, Mrs. Telka Wallace, who is a stalwart basically in the community development, and she is the project coordinator for the MAB, the Man and the Biosphere project, St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, and all of that. Important work that they're doing in the preservation of that area, the preservation of the environment. And equally, I thank Ms. Linnell Bonaparte, Environmental Officer at the Department of Environment. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today on such an important topic. And I do hope that, people would respond generously in terms of, the projects that you have, and also in valuing our environment.
Yes.
So it's extremely important. Thanks to all of our callers to today's program. Of course, we continue to appreciate you from week to week. Next week, we will be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, take good care. I am Les Roy Williams.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Protect yourself